Welcome to the OEMs, Blockers and Breakthroughs podcast, brought to you by Partful. I am your host, Tanya Tran, Partful Head of Marketing. We're here to share real stories from real companies and real people to help OEMs overcome challenges and be amongst those most forward-thinking teams. This is a much anticipated episode for me, especially because I think I first reached out to Nikki about 3 months ago now, I think October. And it was like I was having a fangirl moment because I think Nikki followed me on LinkedIn. So I think, I might be doing something right here. And then I reached out to her and we had a first conversation. And I thought it would be such an interesting conversation for us to have as two tech companies trying to solve problems in the manufacturing industry. I think in this episode, we would like to discuss the outdated technology scene that OEMs globally share. And I think we coming from the tech background, trying to solve kind of the similar problems in the industry, I think we are going to have such an interesting conversation. And I can't be thinking of anyone else better than the two of you, the dynamic duo, to share this conversation with. So just to kick this off, Roman, Nikki, if you could just introduce yourself to Partful's audience and introduce Quotebeam following that, just to let us know what problems do you solve at Quotebeam, who do you solve it for, and how do you solve it?
Sure. So, Tanya, thank you so much for having us. This is super exciting. And yes, my name is Roman Piszcz, and I'm a founder and CEO of Quotebeam. But it took a long time to get here. So my background is in engineering, and really my entire career was all about getting myself out of the comfort zone. So I grew up on a farm. I was a little boy riding tractors and plowing fields, and I became an engineer. So obviously out of the comfort zone. Once I became comfortable in that space, I decided that I gotta move to sales. Right? I'm an engineer. I'm an introvert, and I need to talk to people. Right? So the best way to talk to people is really to go out there and get into sales.
That's the end of the spectrum there. Like, you really put yourself out of the comfort zone there. Like, yeah, I mean, pushing yourself out of comfort zone is like, I'm going to go to this networking event and see how it goes. Not like, I'm going to go from an introvert to sales.
Yeah, it was quite challenging. I obviously missed my introverted space of engineering, but then I got comfortable. So I started going with other sales engineers, visiting customers. I really liked that space. It really gave me an opportunity to understand things from customer perspective. Back when I was an engineer, different requests would come across my desk, and especially the timelines. I was so frustrated with the timelines. Like, we have this new project and we have only 4 weeks to design and build it and deliver it, and I always question why. Why is this? This should be 8 to 16 weeks. We cannot do this. We cannot take that. Once I started interacting with the customers, this is what I learned. There's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe they just got this opportunity and they have this timeline. They have to meet this timeline, or maybe just somebody just forgot something. And now it's on you to see if you want to help them. Get them out of this hot water, or you basically can say, sorry, this is 16 weeks and there's nothing we can do for you. But keep in mind that there's always going to be somebody out there who will get them out of the time, out of those troubles. And that's how you build relationships. So I really enjoy that space, but then again, I got myself into comfort zone. I have to get out of the comfort zone, uh, that's how I function. So I decided to get myself into manufacturing and operations. So, I left that company and I got into probably one of the largest manufacturing operations in the world. I was leading one of the teams on Apple's iPhone product operations. Huge culture shock, a lot of new things for me. So that was a really out of the comfort experience. Once I got comfortable, I decided that, hey, let's start a company. But the beginnings of Quotebeam actually didn't just happen 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It started about 14, 15, 16 years ago. I believe it was 2008. And yeah, it was around 2008. And at that time was a really interesting, thing happened. In that company where I worked at, there was an accounting department that decided that they want to have a clear picture of all the time that engineers spent and what they spent on, and they wanted to make sure that every 15 minutes of that time is accounted into a specific customer's job. So back then I was leading an engineering team, and I think I had about 12 engineers, and every engineer was supposed to account for every 15 minutes of their time. We hated it. This is almost like a keeping track a time as micromanager as your lawyer, and then every month I would have a meeting with my accounting team, and they would go through all these timesheets, and they would question why this engineer only put this many hours, why are we spending so much time on certain things. It was even more excruciating experience. However, there was one silver lining that came out of that. And that was something that kind of started my thinking about how we can improve things and how we can build something that helped the entire industry. And what that was is it really gave me clear understanding, clear picture of how much time we spent on collaboration with our supply partners. This is the first time I noticed that, okay, am I spending 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours just to going back and forth on emails and trying to contact somebody and try to get information. And that was the beginning of Quotebeam. So this is where I started thinking about what can we do to improve the collaboration between engineers, procurement teams, and our supply partners.
That's great. Nikki, would you like to go next? There's a lot.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll echo, this is just interesting every time, you know people, right? I've known Roman for a long time, and I've never heard the story just quite like that. So I have that in common with Roman, that I don't function well in a comfort zone. I always think I'm going to. Once I get there, I get bored, right? So I started my career in machine vision in factories, looking at defects, quality control, things like that. And I loved that until I really mastered it. And then I couldn't help myself but look upstream or downstream from the problem that I was trying to detect or the process that I was trying to automate, and see, what else can we do? How can we make this more efficient? How can we catch the defect or stop the defect from even happening before we have to catch it? And I had these sorts of, moments in my career where I made what seemingly would have been like a random choice to move into a different area. I went from machine vision to pneumatics and electromechanical automation, which is where I met Roman. I was the sales engineer that took him out on some of those calls with me to meet with customers, and we worked on some projects together. And then I ended up in software, even further kind of upstream, helping engineers design the products for manufacture before even getting to the prototype stage. And I coincidentally also worked with some teams that made the iPhone, but on a very different level. Obviously, they were looking at how can they optimize the design and placement of a lot of the components inside the phone to make it perform better, to make sure that it would meet all the standards for testing and things like that, and running those iterations before you ever get to a point of having a physical prototype. Again, to lessen the number of iterations and the amount of time you have to waste, time and money that you have to waste in creating your prototype, testing it, changing something, doing it all over again. And isn't that the whole point of kind of the industry that we're in, is that making products or processes better, faster, less expensive, less wasteful by using technology? But in the same vein, the way that I functioned in my back office as this highly technical salesperson, working with PhD engineers, developing highly technical products and processes, I was relying on a 5-year-old unsupported, CRM system that hadn't been updated in many years. I couldn't segment my databases to give the right information to the right people at the right time. And we were just kind of, mired in a lot of busy work with a lot of broken processes, paperwork, wasted time. right? And it's something that always bugged me, We're at the forefront of this automation. I'd always been in factories trying to solve other people's problems with inefficiency and waste and quality problems with automation. And yet I didn't really have access to use this stuff on my own. And I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, being bombarded with billboards for the latest SaaS product, software, Salesforce and Slack and HubSpot. And yet somehow in the manufacturing industry, nobody was really looking at that or interested in that or talking about that. And it was something that I just personally felt like I was not doing as good of a job as I could have been doing in my job, because I wasn't able to, utilize any of this type of stuff for myself. So I left my job at one point and decided that, I had been working for these German companies, just different companies that had been around a long time. They had all these established processes and procedures, and this is how we do things. And I would bring up, well, why don't we try this? And it's like, well, in this company, this is how we do things. This is how it's always been done. It's fine. And I'm not a person that can sit well with being told, yes, great idea, but we're doing nothing about it. So enough times that I'm going to get fed up, right?
Yeah.
And like Roman, I'm a person that I need to continually be growing. I have a hard time when somebody just puts a roadblock in my face and says, nope, you just can't do it. There's always a way to do things, right? And so I ended up taking some time, and I wanted to work with startups so that I could really be able to take advantage of the new technologies that I kept seeing everywhere. And I ended up working for a number of different startups in hardware and software. And coincidentally, again, through an ex-customer of mine at Apple, I got involved with a software startup that was doing AI for analytics of test data. Again, we were, people test IC chips that are going into the phones and all these things to make sure that they're not going to get fried, that they can function under certain conditions. And then we get a whole big Excel readout that people manually go over to work with these. So the, theme has always been, how do we take something that is really legacy? We've been doing it this way for many, many, many years. There's got to be a better way to do it. And sometimes maybe there isn't the interest, hasn't yet been that entity that says, I'm going to tackle this for this use case in this industry. And I think that in general, the manufacturing industry has kind of been one of those where people look at those problems and they say, yeah, they exist, but, I'm not going to be the one to tackle them. And when Roman told me his idea with Quotebeam, and I was working in the supply chain space at that time, doing advanced analytics and predictions for demand for products, and how do we use machine learning and AI to be able to take more data than we've ever worked with before, to make more granular predictions so that we can stock the right stuff, to not have, too many supply chain disruptions, or how do we effectively communicate together around all this data. And so over the course of many years, and I won't bore you with the very long detailed story of all the times that Roman and I met across different cities, and the, just sort of serendipitous things that made it so that when he took Quotebeam full time, I absolutely had to be the first person to join. But
just so you know, you're not boring me at all. This is all very interesting to me. I'm just gushing over here. I'm just, hallelujah, she's speaking all the things in my head.
Yeah. And when he decided that, it was worthwhile to leave his job at Apple and, tackle solving this problem for an industry that we both love, but, it's kind of a love-hate relationship in some cases, right? You want to tackle this big, hairy, hard problem that, if you think supply chains, or you think, there's so many players involved. It's not something that you can do alone. You need to have, stakeholders, customers, suppliers, kind of everybody has to have some reason to want to move forward or to want to change things. But yeah, I came on board with Quotebeam, and really what we're solving is a very similar problem, I think, what you guys are doing, but our focus is really on this industrial machinery, manufacturing, custom automation, anywhere from, a small cell or a machine that does a process for one thing to, an entire automated line that, from start to finish makes an iPhone or something similar to that, right? All the things we have that we use on a daily basis are made somewhere in a factory at this point. And yeah, the majority of companies that we have found, whether it's that we worked for, that we bought from, that we sold to, are relying on, time tested, but maybe not the most efficient methods of collaborating and communicating through this whole process of finding out what we need, where it's available, how to buy it, how to put it together, and then what to do with that after the fact. And that's really where, Quotebeam is a collaboration platform, and it's, at the heart of it, it's meant to shorten that time from the engineer needing to figure out what they need to the procurement and buying department actually getting those parts on order, and then the supplier fulfilling those orders, getting it in. And then further down the line is helping that customer get the spare parts that they need, or the insight that they need into what needs to be on that machine for it to function long term. And there's a whole lot to that, as a platform business, we kind of do it in stages. So what we've built right now is quotebeam.com is really the only place that's like an Amazon for automation parts. For lack of better term, we aggregate in-stock inventory from a number of regional distributors that normally would not be able to service everyone or make what they have for sale available to everyone. But we bring that together as a partner, and then make it easy for systems integrators, OEMs, machine builders, maintenance personnel, whoever needs these parts, to be able to find and buy them. It doesn't sound revolutionary, because in almost most industries, you can find and buy things that you need. That's generally not the fundamental problem, but in our space, it actually is.
It is. Yeah. It was really shocking to me when I first joined Partful a year ago now, and it was, you would imagine when you think about manufacturing and automation, for example, automotive, like car manufacturers or bikes, motorbikes, those really, dashing looking machines and products, you would think that these manufacturers would be using the most innovative technologies, the most automated, the most anything that's new out there, they must be using, they must be on it, right? But it was so shocking to me when I first joined, and I talked to tens of customers, and I was sat in the discovery calls and talking to our existing customers as well. It was like a contradictory kind of irony of the manufacturing world, is that a lot of the technology they use, you wouldn't imagine that they would still be on it like 20 years, 30 years later. And it is shocking, and I fully empathize with you. And I think we're trying to solve like similar problems, but in like different areas and different niches. And yeah, it is great. Thank you for that really thorough and interesting kind of like stories, and about Quotebeam, and about you both as well. I think for us, just to give Roman a bit of an understanding into Partful, we are a 3D after-sales platform where we provide OEMs within automotive machinery, anything out there with the part, the possibility to uplift their after-sales customer experience. So by using 3D technology, so as a dealer, a distributor, or an end customer, they can go on our platform. On, say, a Honda, for example, they will be able to configure their car to find the exact part that they will need in order to fix the car, replace the broken parts. And we are trying to do that with 3D technology, which is a different way of doing it, but also at the same time trying to provide that technology integration into the OEM's existing systems like PLMs or ERP, and also alongside CAD softwares, and also helping them manage their data a bit more efficiently. And I think it's going to be so interesting, our conversation, and I can't wait to interrogate you guys and learn more from you as well. So can you share some concrete examples of outdated technology that you've come across in working at Quotebeam or serving your customers, and what kind of like stories you can tell and share with our audience?
Oof, a lot of stories. So Tanya, first of all, I really appreciate the work that you guys do with, especially with 3D expanded view of different parts. Little side story. Back in the early 2000s, I built two websites. One of those websites was of a company who was selling spare parts for bag machines, plastic bag machines. And back then, I thought about something very similar. Obviously, I didn't have a 3D technology that could do so beautifully. What I did is I just scanned manufacturer drawings that had those blown up assembly with the little balloons, and I program little spots where user can click, and instead of trying to figure out which part they need, they could just go and look at this image and click on this one balloon. Okay, I want this part, and just take them straight to the cart and they could buy it. So I can really appreciate the advancement in that. What I've done was were very cruel, but it worked. Now I can see how easy and powerful this can be. Going back to your question, the outdated technology. So I would group the outdated technology in manufacturing and industrial automation into three areas. One is transparency and accessibility to data. The other one is collaboration, and the third one is really all this manual work that needs to happen, from one point to another point and so on. So I actually have a really interesting story that kind of talks about transparency to data. One of our customers, they make it's an OEM. They make flexographic printing equipment, and they make bag machines for plastic, industry, winders. And they had a machine. The machine was about $500,000, and they couldn't ship it. And I'm pretty sure every OEM, every system integrator has been in that situation many times. They had a $500,000 machine that couldn't ship because they were missing one servo motor. Machine won't work without the servo motor. The customer won't accept the machine unless the machine is working. And they couldn't get it from their local distributor. The manufacturer was out of stock. Lead time was 25 weeks or so, and they were trying to find it and they couldn't find it. But when they couldn't find it, it doesn't mean that doesn't exist. You just don't know who has it. Back to the point that Nikki made, in United States, there's about 19,000 small regional distributors, and all of them stock between $2 and $40 million worth of parts. But if you try to find that part, you have to call 19,000 distributors. That's not going to happen. So what happened in this case is that they came to Quotebeam and they found this part on our website, and that part came from a very small distributor that had a website, but they didn't have a online store. And at that point, the customer didn't care about the price. They just say, if we can ship that $500,000 machine, that's going to save us. So data transparency is a really, really huge deal that we're trying to bring this, to life. And unfortunately, everything's so fragmented that if you're an engineer or if you're a procurement buyer and trying to find things, it's just extremely excruciating.
Nikki, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. My story will be quicker, but I still I fill out a lot of new customer paperwork and credit applications for partners of ours. And early on, worked with a lot of large procurement organizations that buy from us, doing their required vendor paperwork and stuff. And it still blows me away that process can take weeks. And I'm still asked for a fax number. In some cases, a required field if it's a web form. And that that has tripped me up a couple of times. But that is how pervasive that's just how we've done it and always done it. And it works for us. Mm-hmm. And it works for you being whoever is requesting all this manual paperwork to be done. Because you have a process in place and you've always done it that way. Does it actually serve you and your customers? If you look at the total cost and, just the wages of whoever needs to process that stuff manually, mm-hmm. I don't think that answer is necessarily accurate. But yeah, I would say the fax machine is probably still the most outdated technology that we deal with. And I read a McKinsey report last year that there are still, I think, 2% of B2B businesses do the majority of their business via fax. So there are still companies out there.
Wow. I
that do
don't
more.
think the last time I touched the fax machine was probably 2015.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, I don't know if at this point you've got e-faxes on both sides of that equation, but at that point I don't understand why that's involved whatsoever. But yeah, the other thing is like, we have a fully online business, but we do have to accommodate legacy customers that are just, their process is to take our, cart, basically print it out as a PDF quote, then take it somewhere, make some notes on it, create a PO, and scan both of those things in a physical printer with those handwritten notes on it, and then attach that to an email, or I haven't been receiving these via fax. I ask for emails, but you clearly see that somebody spent a lot of time printing that out, putting those things together, making those notes handwritten on there, and then scanning that in and then sending that to me, and then I have to do the same translation on my side. Blows me away.
It does. It's blown me away again and again and again. And I think I could see a lot of commonalities between what you guys are experiencing at Quotebeam to what we're experiencing here at Partful. The transparency to data and access to data. When you said that, Roman, I was like, hallelujah, we have the same issue. I think the difference is the access to data that we're experiencing, like the barriers to entry here at Partful is more around the disconnected between the engineering team and the after sales team. So the engineering team, you would expect them to use the PLM system to like develop new products. Sometimes they don't use it. So sometimes they just develop it outside on CAD and then papers, and then like draw ideas on whiteboards and then take pictures, things like that, right? You would expect them to make iterations or update that onto PLMs so that the whole organization can be updated on whatever changes have just been made. That's not the case. But whatever change they've made onto PLM, you would expect that to be accessible to the after sales team so that they can update that on their new products or the parts data that they need to sell or update to their dealership network or their end customers. That's not the case either. So there's like multiple versions of data, part numbers, CAD files, bill of materials existing all at the same time. It's like a multiverse of things. And that leads to people just ordering the wrong thing. And I think that data discrepancy, it's such a huge issue within the manufacturing industry. And I think, I think you beat me to it. Like the fax machines, it's just like, I can't beat that now. Because I was going to say Excel sheet, because I did a bit of research into you, Roman, and I know that the story of you founded Quotebeam was because you were working on Excel spreadsheets. Sam's not here today, so I'm just kind of like, Sam, I hope that you'd be proud of me. The story of Sam founded Partful was kind of similar. So he was working on the Excel spreadsheets, which is like bill of materials that has all of the hierarchy of parts and part numbers, alongside a paper-based kind of owner manuals. At the time, he was an equipment operation officer within Special Forces. And that's why he came up with the idea of why not combine the two data sources into one and make them interactive. So that's why we exist today. But I think we were kind of, Sam was looking at it from a more simple kind of simpler light and approach. And once we started, we realized that there were so many barriers to entry in terms of the way that OEMs operate. I came across this post the other day on LinkedIn, and it struck so well with me, is that OEMs tend to just want to operate in a neutral zone. Like as long as they're not making a loss, they're great. And sometimes change management can be difficult in a big organization with employees have been used to a process for like 10 years. And I think for us, like the Excel sheet, the PDF, it's like still very, very much like prevalent today. alongside people, say, making orders via phone calls and like emails and trying to like figure out which part do I order. And at the same time, once they've got the parts orders in, the dealers would make like a bulk order, and the order would be wrong because they've identified the wrong parts. And then that's when it comes to like returns and things like that. It's just costly altogether. So I think we've kind of experiencing similar things. And it's so interesting to hear like you guys experiencing that in the automation world, while we experience the exact same thing in the kind of like the consumer automotive machinery kind of world. And I think there's a lot to like unpack there. So I wanna move on to the next question. You've been in the scene for a bit longer. What have you seen in terms of like cost implications to OEMs because of these kind of technologies like hindering them?
I guess I'll start just because what you mentioned just brought up an anecdote for me from last year. But we were trying to source a safety rated component, and in our world, it's all about the part number, right? The part number is in some cases descriptive because a lot of the parts in our world are configurable. So you have these different options depending on what the letters and numbers and the part number mean. And then sometimes they translate to a shorter numeric number for ordering. But one difference in the part number can make all the difference as to whether or not you can use it for your application. And in this case, there was an S in there for safety. And once if you have a spec for something that needs to be safety rated, the equivalent is something that is very similar, but is not rated for your application. You can't use. And this was actually, I think it was for a Toyota forklift or something of that nature. And we go through our platform. We actually, in this case, did not have the part. Sometimes we have the part on Quotebeam because we have one of these connected suppliers that has it. Easy peasy, right? That then our technology solves the problem. But as we all know with startups and, as we work towards changing these things and fixing the problems, you have to do a lot of unscalable things along the way as well. So at the time, I did a lot of calling around to these different distributors that we did not have connected to our system. They did not have an online store. And I called and, you're giving these part numbers over the phone and somebody had it. And I made a purchase and we did it mostly over the phone because I was trying to move quickly. And this company, that was their preferred way of doing things. And then lo and behold, when it arrives at the customer site, it was not the one with the S in it. Even though I had reiterated that S over the phone very carefully and said, the reason I'm calling is because I'm looking for this safety rated. But somewhere that S got lost in translation and the supplier shipped the part that did not have the S in it. And, they could not release whatever that product was. And, ultimately, I don't know the cost of that mistake, in its totality.
Yeah.
I do know that it cost me several $1,000s in the amount of time and the return that we had to take, because partially I had to take responsibility for this problem. Because yes, I can point fingers all day long and say it wasn't my mistake, but ultimately I was the one that provided the wrong part because my supplier provided the wrong part. And I'm sure you see this in your world as well. It's a cascading effect.
Mm-hmm.
The number of businesses that are affected by this kind of small mistake, right?
Yeah.
Relatively small, you would think, oh, it's just one letter. But it can translate to thousands, multi-thousands, even millions of dollars in losses. Particularly the more entities that are involved, the timelines that are involved, the delays that are involved. I mean, in the manufacturing industry, in some cases, if a line is down due to a part being missing or something not working, it can cost millions of dollars per hour.
Yeah.
So, the size of mistake is very much relative to the stakes at hand.
Yeah.
But something that seems relatively small can end up being very, very costly.
Exactly. I think I might have the answer to your question in terms of like the totality of the cost. So at Partful, in June last year, we did a research on 2,500 dealers across the world, like mostly in the UK and US, plus 250 OEMs globally as well. And we found that 81% of OEMs believe that they are experiencing lost revenue or lost operational cost due to the inefficient in their processes, their after sales processes and their parts processes, alongside 67% of part buyers decide or choose to buy from an outer sources as opposed to from the OEMs themselves, just because it's so bloody difficult for them to find parts information from the OEMs. And it's just percentages, but when you think about the scale of the economy or the scale of the whole industry, it could become $1 billion easily just from the lost revenue from the part sales. So that might be the answer for you there, Nikki.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I think there's another element to it. So let's if we take this whole process one step back from after sales into actually the process of designing and manufacturing these machines. Another implication for OEMs is lost revenue and not a lack of ability to grow due to customer experience. So if you look at time to market. Back in early 2000s, when I was starting my career, the typical project timeline, of 2 to 3 months, 4 months was okay. This was okay expectation. You have plenty of time to design, review, procure the parts, put it together, and deliver to the customer. Over time, we have evolved as a society. We have evolved as consumers. When we go to Amazon, we buy things. Things show up in your doorstep today or tomorrow, and whether we want it or not. If you think about B2B customer, it's actually a consumer behind it, right? So
Yeah.
the same expectations we have in our private lines, we start slowly putting that and merging that into our business life. So, and of course, there's a number of different factors why the time to market for product is being reduced. There's economic factors, higher competition, but really our behavior, really, shifted in a way that now these OEMs may not have 2 to 3 or 4 months time to design and build a machine. They might have 1 to 2 months the most to deliver the machine to the customer. And if they can't deliver those machines to the customer, they're going to lose the business. They're not going to be able to grow. So the OEMs that can figure out how to do it efficiently are the ones that are going to be winning. Now, if you need to do things quick, one way to do it is just throw more bodies at it, right? If we have 5 engineers, let's hire 5 more, and we're gonna figure out how to do it. Which really brings you back to the second element, which Nikki mentioned, is the cost. So if you look at the engineering and procurement teams outside of your C-suite at a company, those are probably some of the most expensive payroll categories in your company. Now, I'm going to give you an example from engineering side. So when I was designing things, I would just, do my thing. I would select the components. I would put them into bill of materials. And by the way, Excel spreadsheet has been the most prominent BOM tool, bill of materials tool in the history of mankind, and there's and still is. So anyway, I would put my bill of materials, and then when ready, I would just send it out to the procurement team, and thinking that, okay, I'm done with this project, I can move on to the next one. That was far from true, because this is where my lack of transparency to data, came in, and I was selecting components that either were discontinued, a procurement team couldn't buy it, or 2, they had long lead times. So so now I can just move on to the next project. I'm going back to the drawing board, trying to select different components that can meet the timeline that we have to deliver this machine. So that is an enormous time wasted. And sometimes I would just spend almost whole day just to try to find the parts that can meet the timeline. And the reason I'm doing this because I know the specs, right? So now I need to find an alternative component. Have I had that information ahead of time about availability for those parts? I probably would make that decision ahead of time, so I don't have to go back and forth. So you kind of mentioned about how difficult it is to adopt new technologies because everybody wants to use Excel spreadsheets, everybody wants to use PDF, and yeah, we've seen it in our world day and night. And I think some of the biggest mistakes that startup companies do when they try to introduce new revolutionary approach to do things, from old way to new way, is that they try to go from 0 to 1 as one step, meaning that they don't provide a provision to the old legacy technologies. So, for example, if you want to move from Excel spreadsheets not to Excel spreadsheets, the way to bring that adoption is probably create that bridge, that allows users to still work in a spreadsheet, but slowly migrates to your software, which was probably 10, 20, 50, 100 times more efficient, more productive than the spreadsheet itself.
Yeah, that's a really great point you've just made there. I think we are trying to do that within Partful at the moment. Still kind of like understanding that change management is difficult, especially behavioral change. It's difficult. Something that's ingrained in you for the last decade. You're not going to just suddenly change it because something shiny and new, good looking comes along. So yeah, we're looking to kind of build that bridge kind of gradually, still allowing them to use Excel and PDFs and CAD, while you being able to upload that into our system and it would generate content for you. So at the same time, that's linked straight back to your bill of materials in an Excel spreadsheet format. And feel free to work in there if you like to, if you want to migrate, come along. We've got tools. And I think that's the best way to like approach it. But I want to circle back to the part where Nikki mentioned the part number versions, that it's such a day-to-day thing for us. It's just like a pain because yes, a number, a chain of digits, for example, you add a letter in it, it's a different part. It's a sellable part, it's a non-sellable part. It's then you've got the engineering part numbers versions, which are completely different to the after sales team part number versions, because it's a screw. So we've seen a lot of our customers do this many times, and it confuses the hell out of us, is that the engineering team, they would send us bill of materials and CAD data, and the part numbers in the two files are completely different. There's no match at all whatsoever. Then the after sales team adopt the manufacturing bill of materials into sales bill of materials, which they changed a lot of the part numbers to make them buyer friendly. So things like, for example, a tube, you wouldn't call it ABCD45V as a part number. You just call it a tube. Yeah. So that means there's such a big discrepancy in that data alone within the same organization, and they don't tend to speak to each other. So when they work with the technology provider, we're trying to use technology to bridge that, but at the same time, that knowledge is solely within the team themselves. Like there's only certain people who have that knowledge, or there's only certain engineer who knows where things are, and that makes it so difficult for them to adopt like new processes and make it more efficient. So yeah, I fully understand what you said.
I think that puts us in a unique position, though, as technology providers that are trying to be the neutral third party that can come in and bridge this gap, right? No organization alone is going to reinvent the wheel on this. It doesn't make sense. But for somebody to come in and try to do it as a whole, as a platform, as a software, it's commendable, but it gets really tricky when you have all these one-off situations at every different OEM. The way that they translate, those steps are not the same at every different manufacturer, right? You can't say, oh, there's 4 different versions of this part number, and this is how they relate to each other, and therefore you can write an automation that translates those. Every single one is different, and that is sometimes, written process knowledge, and sometimes, like you said, it's tribal knowledge. And where we're coming up on, as a society, particularly I'd say in Europe and in the US, is, a lot of people are retiring soon. And if we don't translate this tribal knowledge into process knowledge, into automation before they leave, we're going to be in even more trouble than we are now. But we see this a lot too in our industry, where you have the manufacturer's part number, then you have the manufacturer's alternative part number, which oftentimes will be like an ordering or sales part number. And then you have each individual distributor's version of that part number, because they have their own designation for the part. And so we could have a customer come in asking for one of 10 different variations of a part number. And I likened this to, I don't know, this is probably different in Europe, but here in the US, we have mattress stores everywhere. Sorry, I'm going on a total tangent now, but mattresses, right? Like beds. They have stores that do nothing but sell mattresses, and they are always having sales, and they're always got the rock bottom prices, and they always says that they'll price match. And really all these outlets, they sell a few different brands, but then what they do is they white label or they change the model numbers of the same mattress. So at any different mattress outlet, they'll have the Kingston version of the Sealy mattress. And you go in and you're like, oh, great, they'll price match me. If I ever find a better price for the Kingston model of the Sealy mattress, I'll be able to get, a better price. And it tricks you to thinking you're getting the best deal. Whereas just every different mattress dealer names it differently. So you can never, ever get a price match, because it's never going to be the same, even though it technically is the same product. And we have this a lot in our industry, which is sometimes you have kind of an OEM of a component that makes that component, and they sell it under their own brand. And then a number of other different manufacturers white label that same component and sell it under their own brand with a different part number. And then each one of those manufacturers literally selling the same component has a different distribution network. And every single one of those different distributors will have a different part number for the different version. So in some cases you have and particularly with, during the supply chain sort of issues, our industry had a whole crisis during COVID, particularly any kind of electronic control components. Because our supply chain is so fragmented, we really don't have much purchasing power over, let's say, big automotive OEMs into getting priority access to the chips and such. So we would have these $500,000, multi-million-dollar machines ready to be shipped out, except for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components that are missing. And you cannot for the life of you find it, but there really are like 1,000 of them out there, just under different names, different part numbers, hiding in different warehouses. I like to call it dark stock, because it exists, but nobody knows, unless you happen to be the person that, is in that back stock room that secretly knows that, brand A is actually brand B, and this part number is the same. And I cannot imagine how many billions of dollars as a global economy we are just wasting on. I mean, to me, that just seems so dumb. It's like it's sitting right there, and yet we've disguised it because everybody wants their, I want my piece of the pie, to make sure that nobody can get this unless they call me. Which I think a long time ago was probably a viable way to be competitive in business, but as of today, I don't see the function that serves really.
I think in a sense, this might be a weird analogy, but the manufacturing industry is kind of like a startup still, because in a startup, what we do is we come up with the MVP. So we just draw a couple of things, and then once we've got the MVP, we try and push it out to the market. We've gone to the market with it. Now the product is selling. Now the sales coming in. Now customers are coming in. And then we start to see operational efficiency issues with like how we've organized our data, how we've designed our product. And it's just kind of like all coming out. And I feel like manufacturing industry is kind of like going through that kind of startup scale up phase still, which is weird, because when you think about it, it shouldn't be like that. You think that it's such a polished kind of industry, everything is so innovative, which I think brings me back to like, yes, you know, external facing, it looks really, really polished when you think about like the new iPhone advert or like the new LG washing machine advert. You might think the customers will have an expectation and a perception of the brands, which brings me to customer experience. You know, things like this can heavily impact customer experience, like you mentioned before, Roman. And I think for us, we're starting to see a lot of OEMs coming to us across multiple subsectors like automotive, appliances, even like the heating system, like boilers and like AC units, right? As well as machinery like lawnmowers coming to us. And one of their priorities is customer experience, which is so interesting to me. Do you see the same with like your within your niche as well? And how have that come across to you?
I'll say a very, very big brand that is known for very top of the line, you know, technologically advanced at the forefront of industry. They, you know, you see them on the news and, you know, they're developing the digital twin of the future and those sorts of things. They're European. So in the US, they're trying to, you know, get market share. And one of the things I hear is some customers, they say, oh, I don't deal with that brand because I don't like their distributor. Because I haven't had a good experience trying to purchase this. You know, the distributor doesn't call me back or they don't know enough about the product. And I do business with this company in multiple different ways, and particularly when it comes to marketing. The marketing department is out there trying to get the message out that they have all of this, you know, technology. They have all these experiences, all this connected stuff. And I asked them, you know, do you know how to buy your product? And they said, oh, yeah, we have this distributor locator on our website. And I said, would you mind, I know this is not your job, but would you mind taking a look at that with me? Because the last time I tried to use that to find some place to buy one of your products, I could not. And maybe I'm just dumb, but, you know, can you walk through this with me? And this person that worked at this company could not find a dealer to purchase this product that I was looking for.
Wow.
Because even that experience was broken. And then you think about, okay, if I had found a dealer, I contact that dealer's customer experience has nothing to do with the OEM, but it reflects 100% on that brand, because now my experience trying to find and use and buy that brand's product, I got nothing but roadblocks. And so they may have the best product in the world, but they can't assure to me that I'm going to have a good experience trying to buy that product. And I try to tell this to marketers all the time. I said, I know it's not your area, it's not your job, but you can do the best job marketing your product. But then if people can't buy it, or they can't have a good customer experience trying to buy it, then your work is kind of for nothing, in my opinion, exactly. You know? And it's not going to be the same, of course. Some dealers are great. Sometimes too, it's like you go to a chain restaurant and, you know, maybe the chef's having a bad day. But ultimately, when things are this kind of disjointed, then the manufacturer or the OEM really has no control over that customer experience, and it will affect their brand, even if they're not the ones actually, you know, having anything to do with it.
And so to add to what Nikki said, I think it's also the cost of exit. If you think about it, for the past 3-4 decades, and manufacturing has been very traditional, slow-moving industry. Manufacturing's done a great job in adopting technology for the product, but the way that product is being designed and developed has been really, really slow to adoption of new technologies. So if you think about it, for the past 3-4 decades, the way customers interacted with distributors was really by emails and phone calls. And phone calls, if you think about it, there's only so much time in a day that you as a customer would have time to call different distributors, right? And there's only so much energy they want to put into calling different distributors, given that the experience you get from them is very similar. So it's very, very exhausting. So if you work with one distributor, you might not get great experience, but it may not be bad enough, you know, that you're still gonna work with that distributor or this supplier. and at that point the cost of exit out of that supplier is so high, because when you go somewhere else you can get very similar experience. So for the past 3-4 decades, people were just sticking with that customer experience. Now what changed is the last 3 years, especially with pandemic, a lot of companies struggled supporting the customer because supply chain shortages, everybody was looking for parts. So distributors and suppliers, their calls volume and emails volume quadrupled. They couldn't support all these customers. And that created such a negative experience that a lot of majority of these long-term relationships that customers had with their suppliers, they just got reset to the point where now these customers are open to work with different suppliers, and they're looking for the ones that will provide that great customer experience. And what great customer experience means is data transparency, speed, and convenience. So if you still rely on supporting customers by emails, you can say, hey, if you want quick answer, just send us an email to this specific sales at whatever. Now, in reality, that mailbox is monitored, but it may take 6 to 8 hours, unless somebody responds to it, because it's like a FIFO buffer, first in, first out, right?
Yep.
So 6-8 hours later, you might get an answer, but that's not the expectation of a great customer experience. You can call somebody, but same deal, right? Try to spell my email address with my last name to somebody over the phone. I know I'm not gonna get any emails back.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with you both. I think from like Partful experience, we've got a couple of points as well, which are similar to what you've said and completely right. I think the first one is that customer expectation is when I think it's a generational transformation as well, right? When it comes to like that consumer behaviors, because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it might have been, no offense, boomers on the phone, getting used to that customer experience of, faxing in their orders and then waiting for weeks for the suppliers and the providers to get back to them and fulfill the orders, and things go wrong. Across the industry, across the economy, it's the same standard everywhere, and they got used to it. But with the new generations coming into play now, and they have become the buyers and the customers, their expectations to that shopping experience has evolved. With what you said there, with Amazon next day delivery, e-commerce 3.0, everything is so quick nowadays and so convenient. It transfers into B2B, and especially when it comes to part procurement, when the machine breaks, you expect to have it back and running depending on the level, like the levels of emergency or like urgency. People expect to go on it and be able to order the part, procure it, get it shipped the next day so that they can get back to business. It's still not the case for our industry for some reason. Now, we know what the reason is, but let's say, and they get frustrated. And I think for OEM suppliers, distributors, anyone in the industry who can benefit from new technology that will help them get above, set a new standard, they will do really well. And we can see that. And I think that's the first thing. The second point is, we want to give a bit of benefit of the doubt to the distributors and dealers as well, is that if they work with the OEMs, they themselves are the OEMs customers, and they themselves don't have great experiences with OEMs as well, because we've seen with a lot of our OEMs that we've talked to, we've worked with previously, their dealers and their distributors had such a bad experience with them to the point where a dealership can work for multiple brands, so not just one brand. Apart from exclusive dealership, that's a whole different thing altogether. But usually dealers in our world have worked or serve or sell products from multiple brands, so these brands are competing together to serve this dealer, And if the dealer has a particularly good relationship or experience with a brand as opposed to another brand, they will want to sell the better brand instead. And then that means the customers will have a better experience with the dealer as the representative of the better brand, as opposed to the worst brand. So I don't think when it comes to that, example in particular that you shared, Nikki, it's kind of a multi-layered relationship there. There's a lot to unpack and there's a lot of issues. And I think you're right. Like marketeers in my world, in our world as a tech scene, right? Marketeers tend to be responsible from start to finish. So from the point of, taking that product to market and to the point of you need to make sure that your customers can inquire, book a demo, purchase your product with the most ease possible, right? Why is it so different for marketeers in the manufacturing world where they're like, right, we've got the website up, we've got the product out there, we're promoting it, and it looks great. That's it, we're done. And now the dealerships are, after sales job or, supply chain job or whoever is not my job. So I don't have to worry about it. There's this kind of like inherent like disconnect, and we're starting to see a shift in the mindset because a lot of like CMOs and heads of marketing have started to come to us worrying like as a key stakeholder in the procurement of an after sale kind of technology, right? Which is interesting, which is common sense really, because you need to worry about your customer experience. That's how you grow. But it's still kind of like this legacy mindset still with a lot of OEMs out there, maybe because of their clunky organizational size, which makes them so difficult to work together. I don't know, but I'd like to hear what you think, like the outdated technology, like what are the roadblocks here in terms of, getting them shifted out of that mindset to help them adopt the growth mindset and adopt new changes and also new innovations. What can we do?
So I think when it comes to adoption of new technologies, so when we talk with CEOs, presidents, and of the companies, they all want to adopt technology. There's no question about it. And we've seen, I've seen it in my previous jobs, and even now when we work with our customers, especially distributors, you can introduce new technology, but if you're not going to get buy-in from the people that are actually going to be using it, it's going to fail. Right. So like 10 years ago, if you create a product and create an incremental gain, some people might find this as a great success. But these days, the expectations have shifted. The technology became more complex. The number of systems that these customers have in their company to do different things is much bigger than it used to be before. So these incremental gains not gonna work any longer. When you create a new technology, you have to think about transformational difference. So when you create a new technology, and in the process of doing so, you're gonna add more work to those users. They're gonna hate it. They're gonna push it back. They're gonna do everything for that technology to go away. And here's an example: a lot of suppliers are putting online stores, on their website because they want to make it easy for the customers to buy an order. Let's assume for a moment that they create a great experience for the customer just to place that order. Majority of these online stores are actually not connected with their ERP systems. So now this agent who, customer service or inside salesperson at the supplier or distributor, now they need to take this order, they need to print it or copy paste, go into their ERP system, re-enter this order. That just creates more work for them. So if you ask that agent, are you in love with your new website? Then they're gonna say, hell no. I mean, I was busy before. Now I'm even busier. I have no time to do anything. So if you create technology that adds more work for the users, it's not going to get adopted. So technology has to really work well and integrate itself into other systems.
I think we're going into another black hole here in terms of integration, because I feel like that's another pain that we have as an industry, is that, when you mention like HubSpot, Salesforce, Slack, Google, all of these new shiny tools that we can use as marketeers and, in the tech scene, to help improve operational efficiency, everything is integrated. With HubSpot, for me, I think this kind of created an expectation, more of an unrealistic expectation on my end as well when it comes to manufacturing tech, is that because MarTech, it's so simple. You have your CRM, then you have your CMS, and then you have all your marketing platforms. You can integrate anything into anything by a point and click, no code integration. You match your fields, everything is updated in real time. That means you have your one single source of truth. Then you have all your platforms and your channels where you expand your operation and make it more efficient. And your job then, it's only, do you have money to spend on a new piece of tech, rather than do you have money to manage, or do you have time to manage it still? Why is it not the same for us? Which is kind of, I am befuddled as to the ERPs are not connected to PLMs. There's no integration unless you have such a powerful buyer who can then put in a bespoke request for these two systems to integrate. There's no integration between PLM, PDM with ERPs or CRM. And it makes it so difficult for the teams to work together, because they want to work together, right? But they can't, because if they want to work together, there's going to be 1,000 meetings, 2,000 emails, 3,000 data updates, and just things like that makes it so inefficient and counterproductive. Do you feel the same?
Yes, 100%. And we've actually, over our evolution, had to look at ourselves in the mirror a few times and say, maybe we need to help with this, right? It's not supposed to be in our area of integration, or, it's not the specific problem we're trying to tackle. Mm-hmm. But in order for us to be able to solve the problem we're trying to tackle, there's so many adjacent problems. Let's take a distributor, for example. Oh, we have the greatest solution. All you need to do is plug in, the information from the products that you sell. Well, a distributor, like you said, often carries multiple different manufacturers' lines. And in the cases of our industry, any given manufacturer can have tens of thousands of items in their catalog. And if they're not providing that product data to the distributor, how exactly is a distributor going to be able to put these tens of thousands of items in an online store, for instance, if they don't have the product data from the manufacturer? All they have is a PDF catalog, or God forbid, a printed one, right? But in many cases now, the manufacturers of our industry have gotten to a point where their catalog is maybe semi-digitized, but oftentimes that means static web pages that essentially function like a PDF catalog, right? It's that you can't really, without scraping or something, and they're not providing that data to their distributors in a format that the distributors can use. So the ones that have been able to really win at e-commerce have spent millions of dollars on recreating that data themselves, or managing some sort of transition. There are third-party companies that do nothing but manage this data between the manufacturer and their distributors.
Yeah.
So there's many sort of small parts of this process that I didn't, before starting this journey, realize were such a big blocker. Mm-hmm. And you multiply every distributor by the, 100 so manufacturers they have on their line card, and you get to see this, okay, maybe 2 or 3 on that line card have their digital assets together and available for the distributor. And then, 98 to 90s, whatever, the other ones, they have a PDF catalog.
Yeah.
And so, there's things that we didn't necessarily envision being part of our platform initially that we've had to include. Yep. Be it integration services, creating APIs for different things, helping distributors get the data from their manufacturers and so on. Mm-hmm. Just because without those pieces in place, you can't actually solve the problem properly.
Yeah.
But it is a very multi-layered sort of problem.
Yeah.
And like you said, coming from that, let's say consumer world, or a small business, even in some cases, like, oh, I've got QuickBooks, great. QuickBooks has APIs to the other 3 softwares that I use. But when you get to that middle level, enterprise that isn't, doesn't have the millions and millions of dollars to invest in a bespoke SAP integration, they're kind of stuck in no man's land.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's so many problems to unpack,
and don't get me started on the multi-million-dollar ERP, bespoke solutions either, because after 10 years they might get them in place and then they can never change them because it would take another 5 years of change management and another few $1,000,000 to ever change that process, which I think is also why in some cases we're stuck with, well, this is how we've been doing it and this is how we do it for the last 10 years, because it would be too expensive for us to even try to change it. Let alone do we have the ability to change how we do things.
It also comes to the comfort zone. We're talking about the companies in the manufacturing industry. For decades, they've been focusing on building product and sales. And now we're talking about this new advanced technology that they can use to boost their productivity, boost their sales, brand image, and so on. But that requires those APIs, that interconnectivity between the different systems. And a lot of the leaders and decision makers, this is out of their comfort zone. They might have some older ERP systems, older CRM systems, or even if you have an older ERP system that is not being able to connect to other systems, that basically is something that is going to hinge them from being able to connect. Make this cohesive system that talks to each other, and it really comes back to that comfort zone. Like, okay, this is I don't know much about this, so I'm gonna stay away, or maybe I'm gonna push it out by another year. And we have an example. We, as Nikki mentioned, whether we want it or not, we went ahead and built a number of API systems and integrations. One of them is one of the most prominent ERP systems in distribution industry, and we can pull the data. We can show a real-time stock inventory. We can automate quotes. We can push the orders directly to the ERP system, so nobody needs to touch anything. Yet at the same time, we have a lot of customers that use that ERP systems, and they are not comfortable with using that integration because it's not really something that they understand very well. So I think right now we're kind of going through that transition period where some of those companies are hiring a different talent for their operations, personnel that actually has understanding on those new tools, have understanding on integrations, and we see slow progression to that space.
I think that's interesting because it blew me away when I learned about this the first time, but also it kind of reassured me as well that this is like everyone's on the same boat. No one's doing better than anyone else. And we're trying to change that mindset, and we're trying to change the productivity and efficiency, and also the integration gradually through digital transformation. And I agree that I think it's a gradual transformation rather than it's a flip of a switch. So yeah, I think there's the bittersweet kind of conclusion to that point, I guess. We're trying to also working on a PLM integration at the moment, and I think for when I first came into the conversation about this, I was kind of expecting that point and click no code integration, which will in a sense democratize kind of technology across the industry, because if we could make that no code integration, everyone can start using it and the whole industry will see a new horizon. But it's now coming clearer and clearer to me that that's not the case, at least not for now. Hopefully, as we we need more Roman and Nikki's of the world who would like to get out of their comfort zone to be able to help us transform this industry a bit quicker, I guess. That takes me to the conclusion of today's episode, which I've learned a lot and I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I want to end our episode by asking you guys the last question, which, if there's one thing you would like to say to our OEMs globally across automation, automotive machinery, medical devices, etc., about digital transformation and making that leap to adopt new technology and dump outdated technology, what would you say to them?
That's a good question.
I would say, look for partners like Partful and Quotebeam that come from the industry that have lived the problems that they're trying to solve. Because I think from the outside, from the tech world, looking at manufacturing or any one of these, areas, it just seems, and you experience this, Tanya, it takes a while to dig into the details to realize why we're where we are, right? It seems ridiculous from the outside, but once you really understand the nuance of this, you know why we are where we are. And there's a lot of reasons, and they're complicated. And I think as more of us that are in the industry that have lived these problems become brave enough to try to solve them together, right, as a community or as a platform in an industry that is, find somebody that understands your niche, and be brave enough to work with them. Because we really, and I would say this for other companies that are doing similar things that we are. We're not coming in and saying, oh, we know better after spending 2 seconds looking at your industry, right? You can come in and with the broad sweep say, oh, I'm just going to make an API and it'll solve all these problems. And then it'll never actually solve anything because you don't know the nuance behind implementing it, making it useful, making it, adopted. I think there's a lot to be gained at tackling these problems together. And if you're in an organization where you're looking at, okay, I think that this can really help us, but maybe we don't know exactly how to move forward, these are exactly the partners that understand the challenges you have with your change management inside your organization as to how these technologies can help you. But we're right now in a space where any early adopter to these technologies has a huge advantage over their competition. Because if you can master having this customer experience that actually provides, the new generation of buyers with what they're expecting from their consumer type experience, and you can bridge that gap as well to the older buyers that still are doing things the old way, then really I think there's, the next 5-10 years, there's going to be a huge clear runway between you and your competitors that decide not to adopt this type of technology. And somebody that's solving that problem from inside your industry and knows the nuances is going to be the right partner to make sure that you're successful implementing these and not just selling you the next shiny thing that sounds great on the surface and then ends up being a failure at the end of the day.
That's so good. I mean, you've covered everything I wanted to say. Roman?
Yeah, so from my side, I would say that this is the time to invest in new technologies. And it's not a nice to have, it's a must. Companies that don't do that, somebody else will, and they're going to get outpaced by the competition because competitions can be much more efficient, faster, more cost efficient as well. But outpacing by competition is not the only problem that those companies are going to have. So if you don't invest in these technologies, you're going to have a hard time attracting good talent. Because engineers, they want to do engineering work. Especially the younger engineers, they don't want to go and chase information. They want to do the real engineering. And if you don't have good technology, they're not doing that. They're not going to be happy. They're going to look for companies where they can. On the procurement side, procurement buyers, procurement teams, believe it or not, they don't want to chase parts. They don't want to go and spend days on googling and finding who's got stuff, parts in stock. They want to build supply chain relationships. That's what their job is. So adopting technologies is not something that we should do in the future. This is something that we should have done yesterday, but we definitely have to do it today.
Yeah, brilliantly said. The change, it's here, whether you are going to adopt it or not. So to the most OEMs out there, technology like tech platforms like Quotebeam and Partful, as well as 3D technology that we use within Partful as well, are, probably a few steps ahead in terms of most of your competitors out there. And we discussed a lot of the barriers to entry in terms of you using our technology, but we want to work with you. We understand that it's not the flip of the switch, it's a gradual transformation. We're happy to take step by step in that journey to help you transform your business. So alongside, integration and things like that. So we want to work with you as well. So it's not just you have to invest. We will invest in you and in our relationship together. And I think with that, you don't have to operate at a constant avoiding loss mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. You can start looking at that 20-30% profitability alongside your team working well together as a well-oiled machine. And I think that kind of concluded the episode today. Thank you so much, Nikki and Roman. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. And I think our audience will learn a lot from you both today as well. Let's keep in touch. I'm always following, and I'm a huge fan of Automation Ladies as well. So
Thank you.
Always be listening. As those of you who haven't heard of Automation Ladies, Nikki and Ali run a podcast called Automation Ladies. Their presence is across LinkedIn and all of the podcast apps as well. Nikki, I'm going to put in the show notes as well where they can find your podcast and follow Quotebeam and their journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you.
Yes. This is wonderful. Appreciate you having us on.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.